I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 316. And we're back with another Rut Fresh Radio episode in which we're getting you updates on the progress of the rut, current deer activity, and the tactics that are working right now from hunters all across the country. All right, welcome to this week's episode of Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio. It is November 13th. I am your host, Spencer Newharth, and we are flying solo today without Mark Kenyon because he is pulling some all-day sits as he tries to get close to that buck he's been hunting, Trent. I hope that you've been spending some time in the woods too, because this is the best time of year to be out there. As we've talked about before, the rut only comes once a year. It's like a 10-day window where the deer movement is the absolute best that it's going to be, and I hope everyone has a chance to take advantage of it. But during this part of the rut, people often talk about the rut phase called lockdown. I think the idea of lockdown has outgrown what this phase of the rut actually is. For most hunters, when they're talking about lockdown, they're talking about this like 2 to 3 day window where the does are now willing, so the bucks will breed them. And when that happens, a buck and a doe will hook up and they'll bed down in some area for almost the entire length of daylight. The areas that they seem to bed down in are fairly random. As a South Dakotan, I've seen a ton of bucks and does locked down in the middle of a cut cornfield where there's not a tree within like a half mile of where they are. But then you also see them sort of locked down in your more traditional areas like thick timber where does prefer to bed. And during this phase of the rut, people often talk about how mature bucks basically go from cruising at midday and being as reckless as they will be all year to not being seen at all because they're sat down with some doe somewhere. Now, there are some truths and some lies about what that actually is. Yes, this is like the peak breeding where does are willing and bucks will find them and they'll bed down for periods of time, but it is not as dramatic as all of the does coming into estrus within like a 48-hour window where they all then find willing bucks and they all then stop moving in daylight. That's not the case. Studies have shown that the rut is like a bell curve, and the top of the bell curve right now, deer movement has peaked. And sure, those bucks will bed down with those does for some time, but after that's over with, those bucks are going to get up and start cruising again and start looking for another doe. And all of those does are not entering estrus at the exact same time. If you hunt in an area that has a high density of deer, you're still going to be seeing a lot of movement. But if you're limited to like a 10-acre property and there's only one mature buck around, and today he locks down with some doe and he doesn't move for 8 hours, and then tomorrow he gets up and he moves off to another property in search of does, then there might be that perceived lockdown. where it seems like the bucks have stopped moving. Now, that's not the reality, and this is certainly a tougher time of year to hunt than maybe it was a few days ago. But if you're not in the woods, then you're only hurting yourself, because those deer are going to be up and they're going to be moving. If you want more info on lockdown, check out themeateater.com, where Mark Kenyon has an article coming out later this week on what you need to know about the lockdown and how to hunt this phase of the rut. For this week's callers, we have Brad Bever from Lone Wolf Treestands in Indiana. Then we talk to Spencer Konuszewski from Redline Hunting in Georgia. Then we go to North Dakota and talk to Alex Comstock from Whitetail DNA. And then from Heartland Bowhunter in Kansas, we talk to Trent Siegle. And I'll tell you before we get into these interviews, everybody is really optimistic that we talked to this week, which this can kind of be a tough time of year to keep grinding and keep after it and stay optimistic, because if you've been at it since early November, then you might be about over this. But from Brad, Spencer, Alex, Trent, you're going to hear some really positive and encouraging things about why you should be in a tree right now. Okay, and let's go to our first caller. All right, and joining us on the line first is Brad Bever in Indiana from Lone Wolf Treestands. Now, Brad, in Indiana, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
So I've hunted Indiana for 3 days straight now. I came in on Monday, and I've seen a ton of buck activity. Obviously, it's that second week in November, so it's going to be good. But I would definitely put it up there 9 or 10. I've seen bucks with noses on the ground. I've seen bucks running does hard. So, yeah, definitely 9 or 10.
Are you seeing a lot of midday movement at this point?
That's a tough question. I haven't really been hunting midday because of work, so I can't say yes or no to that. But I can attest to, obviously, being kind of peak rut. I know a lot of guys who are hunting all day, or seeing deer all day. This is the time, if you're going to sit all day and hunt in the middle of the day, this is the time to do it.
When you're out there, you do a lot of mobile setups. How much are you moving your stands just like an extra 30 yards closer? Or are you often second-guessing yourself and moving a stand just a little bit down a trail this time of year? Or are you sticking with what you know?
Right, so that's a great question. Actually, tonight, kind of to answer your question, my hunt tonight, I saw my target buck 200-300 yards off, and I saw him into a woods pretty far off with some doe. So I did something a little unconventional, but because of the time of year and because of the rutting activity, I can kind of get away with it. But I actually got down half an hour, 45 minutes before dark and moved my stand 150 yards to the east to accommodate for tomorrow's wind. So I'm hoping to actually catch him coming back to the bedding area. But to answer your question, this is the time to stay mobile, and this is the time that if you have a buck that you want to target and you think you can jump on, this is the time to do it. So obviously I saw that buck 200-300 yards off. I knew where he was, so I knew I could get away with moving without spooking him. Whereas if I came in tomorrow morning, I'm not sure where that buck's going to be. So to answer your question, yeah, this is the time to stay mobile.
What's your strategy as a bow hunter once we approach lockdown?
Once we approach lockdown, I kind of go with the mentality of the only way you're going to kill a buck is if that doe, if the doe that he's on comes by. You can rattle and you can call it bucks all you want, but if they're locked on does, usually that's all they're going to pay attention to. So as a bow hunter, I like to get into bedding areas, obviously sit all day if you can, just so you're kind of doe hunting at that point. If you can get on the doe that he is on, that's about the only thing that's going to bring him in.
Are you concerned at all this time of year with food sources?
Yeah, that depends a lot on the weather. Like Indiana just got 4 inches of snow last night, so I've seen a lot of deer in cornfields trying to overturn the snow and get the corn. But again, right now, being the second week in November, deer are going to be moving anywhere they can, so just get in the woods.
How about sign making? Do you think rubs and scrapes are still relevant at this point?
I would say so a little bit. Once we move more towards lockdown, I would say their bucks are probably going to stop checking scrapes as often just because they're more concerned about that doe, like I said earlier. But I personally, always, if I can find a scrape or a rub line, I'm always going to hunt it no matter the time of year. But again, as we approach lockdown, I think they're probably going to be more focused on that actual doe than checking their scrapes like they would in October.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Indiana?
I would say this week we're going to be pushing, I would again put it at 9 or 10, but as we approach lockdown, obviously everybody knows it's tough to kill a buck when he's locked on a doe, so it may come down a little bit. You may not see bucks moving as much when they get locked on that doe, but it's hard to tell when that's actually going to happen, so I'll keep it at 9 or 10. I hate to put it at a perfect 10, but the movement I've been seeing, it's really good.
All right, Brad, great intel. Good luck in Indiana, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Spencer Konuszewski from Redline Hunting in Georgia. Now, Spencer, in Georgia, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think the past few weeks, I would kind of consider it kind of being a little bit more of a 6 out of the scale of 10. But I think good things are coming.
So what phase of the rut do you think most of the state is in right now?
I think, like I said, the last few weeks, kind of that early stage of rut activity. I've heard a lot of stories of some smaller bucks chasing some does, kind of sparring a little bit. And then the last couple of days, I've gotten more stories of some bigger bucks coming in, looking at some smaller bucks as well, and kind of chasing them out. So I think we're getting geared towards full rut here in the Atlanta area of Georgia.
Are you seeing a lot of sign making right now then?
Yep, I'm still seeing a lot of rubs. I've noticed, actually just walked out to my spots today and have noticed some new tree marks that I've seen, some new rubs that I've never seen before.
What food sources should hunters be keyed in on right now in Georgia?
I think in our area, the acorn levels are still pretty heavy. So I think the bucks and big bucks and smaller bucks are still feeding off the natural acorns. But I've had some good stories of, people using corn that they still got some does coming in, but the big ones aren't coming to the bait piles as much, just because I think there's so many acorns out there for them to eat.
So where are your trail cameras focused right now during this stage of the rut?
I've got most of my trail cameras are on some good rubs, some scrapes on some trees is kind of where I put them. I got a few good paths that I know that the deer are kind of coming through from woods to woods. We're kind of lucky. We got a couple funnel areas that we've been hunting that I think are going to be the most successful as the rut gets in closer.
When we get a full moon around this time in November, do you think that changes anything for you in Georgia?
I do. I think after that full moon, the next few days is just going to heat up more. If you look at the moon phase and the days, how they're getting a little bit shorter here in Georgia, I've always noticed that once those days start getting a little shorter, that the rut is closer, and then the deer are starting to move a little bit more. Along with the cold front that's about to hit us, I think the rut is going to be in full effect here in the next few days.
Are you guys doing anything really aggressive this time of year, like any calling or decoying?
No on the decoying. We had a couple guys do some rattles a few weeks ago. They had some success with rattling, but I think the last couple of days, some light grunt calls, some little doe in a can is what I've heard some success stories on. But I think, especially tomorrow, I'm going to be trying to use my buck grunt a little bit more heavily than I have in the past.
In Georgia, when do you start to expect to see some midday cruisers?
I think we're going to start seeing some more of the midday cruisers about this time. We've seen some more bucks being hit on the side of the road. You probably can't drive more than a couple miles without seeing a decent buck on the side of the road, which kind of tells us the rut is near and the bucks are starting to move during the day, which is exciting.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Georgia?
I think with the cold front coming in and the weather in Georgia, I think it's going to be a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Here in Georgia, we really don't see the weather getting down into the 20s, and the fact that it's happening right at the perfect time of rut, I think the potential is going to be huge.
All right, Spencer, well, good luck to you and the guys from Redline Hunting. Thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Spencer.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Alex Comstock from Whitetail DNA in North Dakota. Now, Alex, in North Dakota, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd put it probably at about a 5 or a 6. I've been out here for about 10 days, and it hasn't been constant movement, but it's kind of come in spurts, and I've seen a good amount of mature bucks, and I've seen everything from chasing to cruising to midday movement, but it just hasn't been like the constant fast and furious. It's just been kind of coming and going in spurts, if that makes sense.
5 or 6 seems really low for this time of year. What do you think are the factors that are making this a worst rut in North Dakota?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's affected me is there's a lot of corn around, and this year in North Dakota it was really wet, and so farmers weren't able to get to the crops as soon as they normally do, and so there's a ton of standing corn around me, and I think that's having an effect on some of the lack of deer that I've seen. It would be kind of my guess.
You've hunted North Dakota for a while. This year, with there being so many standing crops, how does that change some of your sort of traditional rut setups? Do you have tree stands at different locations to factor in for all the standing corn?
Yeah, so I really wasn't prepared for that. I used to live out in North Dakota, so it was easier for me to adapt. But now having to travel out here, I did move a couple stands closer to corn. A couple of my go-to, I guess I would call funnel areas where deer are usually traveling. Like a really good example is I have this skinny pinch that goes north and south, and deer are always traveling through there. This year, a lot of that traffic's going east and west, going from and to the standing corn. And so I've tried to change a little bit, and I've got a couple stands real tight to that corn.
So what are you ideally looking for as a public land bow hunter during this time of year?
I'm looking for areas that just aren't being hunted in North Dakota. That's usually pretty easy to find. Rifle season opened here last week, and that didn't really change much for me. I do a little bit of scouting around with hunter pressure. I got down on Saturday midday and figured if anyone was rifle hunting, they'd probably still be out all day if they only have the weekend. And so drove around, looked for other hunters, figured where they were, which there was just a couple, and then kind of made game plans from there.
So what phase of the rut would you say that we're in right now in North Dakota?
I'd say we're in definitely like the seeking and chasing phase. I'd say there's probably breeding going on too. I had, right now it seems to me that when you have a hot doe around, as it always is during the rut, it can be a game changer. I had the other morning, I had what I assumed to be a hot doe around me because I had 8 bucks on her. And then today, for example, I saw 9 different does and didn't see 1 buck. So I think when you have that right doe in the area, that can really change everything right now.
When we get into lockdown in this next week or so, what do your setups look like then?
I'm trying to get in those the really thick areas where I think bucks are pinning does down. or getting in between doe bedding areas, because especially out in North Dakota, I found that 15th to the 20th can be a really good time frame. Get between doe bedding areas, and hopefully you can time it right where, a buck's getting off one doe and looking for the next, and you can be in those travel corridors. I've had some really good hunts out here that time of year.
Do you think sign making is relevant at all in that part of the country right now?
I don't think so right now. I've been here since, the 4th. Those first couple of days, scrapes were still being hit. I watched a couple of bucks hit scrapes, and they were kind of being opened up every day. But in the last few days, I haven't noticed any scrapes or any new rubs or anything going like that.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in North Dakota?
Yeah, I'd like to think it'd be in that 7 to 8 range. This time of year, kind of between that 15th and 20th, I found to be some of the best hunting I've experienced out in North Dakota. And I'm hoping with the temperatures, we're actually going to be trending up a little bit, which I think will help me, because it's been so cold here. With the wind chill today, it was about negative 15 this morning, and it was just miserable. And I don't know, I think sometimes deer might just be hunkering down when it gets to be that cold. And hopefully in the next week, it picks up even a little more.
All right, Alex, well, I hope things turn around for you on your public land hunt in North Dakota. Good luck, and thanks for joining me.
All right, thanks, Spencer.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Trent Siegle in Kansas from Heartland Bowhunter. Now, Trent, in Kansas, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd say it's been a 9 lately. I've seen a ton of bucks cruising and chasing, fighting. I'm only giving it a 9 right now because I just haven't seen a lot of big ones in person yet. I know they're moving out there. I just haven't seen them.
So what phase of the rut would you say that the state of Kansas is in right now?
I think we're approaching lockdown here. It's close for sure. I've definitely seen bucks with does. Obviously, they're fighting for them. I think going forward this week, I'm definitely going to be focusing on hunting the doe areas and just hoping the right doe brings the big guy out in front of me.
If you think we're approaching lockdown, how much longer do you expect to see some of that midday movement among bucks?
Oh, I think it's still going to be good. We here in Kansas have a pretty good buck to doe ratio. So, we're still going to see lots of deer moving all day long, I feel like, especially because the weather's pretty decent. But the big ones are either going to be coming out with the does or just, searching for that next one as soon as they're done with the one they're with. So I still think it's going to be a great week.
When we do get into that lockdown phase, what is your strategy? Paint us a picture of where you want your tree stand to be during that phase of the rut.
Absolutely. So mornings, I typically try to get tucked up close to an area I know a lot of does bed, and just try to catch a buck cruising, scent checking that area. And then in the evenings or afternoons, later in the day, I'll slip out and try to relocate to a good food source, a big food plot I might have, or any standing crops that are still there that all the does are hitting. And just like I said before, hope the right doe brings the big boy out.
Has this season been a struggle at all to get deer on your food plot with all of the standing crops?
Yes, absolutely. It's been a struggle to find them. I feel like we've had so many crops in, and just it hasn't condensed the deer down to their normal areas at this point in the season for sure. With all the food everywhere, and lots more bedding areas or places to hide.
Do you pay attention to trail cameras at all this time of year, and where do you have most of those set up as we approach lockdown?
Most of my cameras right now are, I have a lot set up on time-lapse mode on big food plots for the afternoon, and then lots of them on trails or scrapes still. Even though the bucks aren't hitting the scrapes as much, it'll still catch movement going by. And I do use them a lot still. One of the best strategies I have is if it's windy out or have the right wind direction, something to kind of cover my noise, I'll check them and try to figure out if there's a buck in that area that morning. generally that afternoon he's going to be there too, and that's usually my best sits. If I can slip in, if it's windy enough to, like I said, cover my scent or my noise, anything like that. If he was on that camera in the morning, 9 times out of 10, he's going to be coming back out with a doe or something like that in the afternoon, and those are usually my best sits.
Most of the country just had a cold snap roll through, Kansas not excluded. Do you think that really helps deer movement? You said that you've had some really good midday cruising, or do you think this time of year that's not really a factor?
I do think it matters. The last 2 days, the pressure has just been through the roof, and I've hunted about the last 10 out of 11 days, and the movement alone just on what I saw last night and then cell cams today was just incredible. I mean, all day deer were moving both days, and the pressure, I think yesterday was around 30.7 and today it was, around 30.5. So it definitely makes a big difference. I mean, we still see good movement this time of year, but I still feel like if it's not this cold and high pressure system, we just see that movement at first thing in the morning and kind of last hour or so of light. But the last 2 days, it's been incredible all day long.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Kansas?
I still think it's going to be, 9 or 10. I mean, this is the time of year. Any of you guys out there, if you have days of vacation to burn or a day off, I mean, everybody get in the stand right now. This is what we as whitetail hunters dream about. We live 40 days out of the year for these, this month of November. Get out there and hunt, enjoy it while you can, and take it all in, watch God's creation, and just be thankful we get to hunt in this great country.
I like your optimism. Good luck to you and the guys from Heartland Bowhunter. Thanks for joining me, Trent.
Appreciate it. Good luck, man.
And that concludes this week's episode of Rut Fresh Radio. Thanks to Brad, Spencer, Alex, and Trent for joining me, and thank you guys for listening. I hope everyone's in the woods for these last few days of the absolute best time of year. We will talk to you guys next week, but until then, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.